My hands were shaking as I scrubbed the marble floor of Vincent Romano's big house for what I thought would be the last time. I had finally saved enough money to leave with my son Tommy, to start a new life somewhere far away from Chicago's dangerous streets. But when I heard the heavy footsteps coming toward the kitchen, my heart sank. I knew that voice before he even spoke. "Going somewhere, Isabella?" Vincent's deep voice cut through the quiet like a knife. I froze. My cleaning cloth was still in my hand. Soapy bubbles dripped onto the clean floor. How did he know? I had been so careful and so quiet about my plans. I slowly turned around to face the most feared man in Chicago. The man whose house I had been cleaning for 6 months. The man whose dark eyes had been filling my dreams. I was just finishing up, Mr. Romano," I whispered. My voice was so quiet you could barely hear it. His steel-gray eyes looked at me so hard it made my knees feel weak. Vincent Romano wasn't just any man. He was the leader of the most powerful crime family in the Midwest. And somehow I had fallen in love with him. But what he didn't know, what no one knew, was that I had a 3-year-old son hidden away in a tiny apartment across town. A son whose father had left us, making me work 3 jobs just to survive. A son I would do anything to keep safe, even if it meant running from the only man who had ever made me feel truly alive. "Before you go," he said, stepping closer, "there's something we need to talk about." That's when we heard it. A small, desperate knock on the front door. If you want to know how I got here, subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. This is my story and you won't believe how it started. 6 months earlier, I was just another invisible woman in Chicago, working 3 jobs to keep myself going. My name is Isabella Martinez, and at 24 I felt like I had already lived 3 lifetimes. Every morning at 5 a.m., I'd kiss my sleeping son Tommy goodbye and go out to clean office buildings downtown. Then I'd rush to my afternoon job at Romano's mansion in Lincoln Park and finish my day serving tables at a diner until midnight. Tommy's father, Marcus, had disappeared the moment I told him I was pregnant. "I'm not ready for this," he'd said, like being a father was a jacket he could just choose not to wear. So it was just me and Tommy against the world, living in a tiny studio apartment where the heat barely worked and the neighbors were either too loud or too quiet. The kind of quiet that meant trouble. I had been working at the Romano mansion for 2 weeks when I first really saw Vincent. Oh, I'd seen him before. A tall figure in expensive suits moving through the house like he owned not just the building but the air inside it. The other workers whispered about him in hushed voices, crossing themselves when they said his name. "Don't look him in the eye," Maria, the head housekeeper, had warned me on my first day. "Don't speak unless he speaks to you first. And whatever you do, don't ask questions." But that Tuesday afternoon in October, everything changed. I was cleaning the huge library, running my cloth over the leather books that probably cost more than I made in a year, when I heard shouting from the main hallway. Men's voices, angry and threatening. My hands froze on the bookshelf as I recognized the tone. It was the same tone Marcus used to use right before he'd slam doors and disappear for days. "You have 48 hours, Romano," a rough voice snarled. "Pay up or we start taking things that matter to you." "Get out of my house," came the answer, and I felt my breath catch. Vincent's voice was deadly calm, but there was something underneath it that made my skin prickle with danger. I should have minded my own business. I should have kept cleaning and pretended I heard nothing. But I was always too curious and I found myself creeping toward the library door trying to hear more. "This isn't over," the first voice said. "The Torrino family doesn't forget debts." "Neither do I," Vincent replied. And there was something in those 3 words that made my blood run cold. I heard footsteps, heavy boots moving toward the front door, then the slam that shook the entire house. In the silence that followed, I realized I was holding my breath. I quickly moved back to the bookshelf, trying to look busy, but my hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped my cleaning supplies. That's when I heard different footsteps, measured and deliberate, coming toward the library. The door opened and Vincent Romano stepped inside. I had never been this close to him before, and the impact was like being hit. He was tall, probably 6 feet 3 inches, with broad shoulders that filled out his charcoal suit perfectly. His dark hair was slightly messy from running his hands through it, and his gray eyes were stormy with barely held back anger. But it wasn't his obvious wealth or power that made my heart skip. It was the tiredness I saw in his face, the weight he carried that reminded me of my own struggles. "You heard that," he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "Are you going to run to the newspapers?" Sell your story to the highest bidder. His voice was tired, like he'd had this conversation before. No, sir, I managed to whisper. I clean houses. That's all. He looked at me for a long moment and I felt exposed, like he could see every secret I'd ever kept. What's your name? Isabella. Isabella Martinez. How long have you been working here, Isabella? 2 weeks. And in those 2 weeks, what have you noticed about this house? I swallowed hard, thinking of Maria's warnings. That it's beautiful. That the people who work here respect you. And that, I stopped. And that what? That you work very hard? I said quietly. I see the lights in your office until very late. I see the phone calls that make you look tired. You carry a lot. Something changed in his face. Surprise maybe. Or recognition. Most people see the suits and the cars and think that's all there is. I know what it's like to carry weight, I said before I could stop myself. Different weight, but I understand. We stood there in silence for a moment and I felt something pass between us. A connection I definitely shouldn't be feeling with a man like Vincent Romano. Isabella, he said finally, I need to know I can trust you. You can, I said. Because if I can't, he didn't finish the sentence, but he didn't need to. You can, I repeated, and I meant it. He nodded once, then turned to leave. But at the door he paused. The Torrino family, they're dangerous people. If you see anyone around here who doesn't belong, anyone asking questions about me or this house, you tell me right away. Understood? Yes, sir. And Isabella? He looked back at me. Thank you for what you said about carrying weight. Not many people understand that. After he left, I stood alone in the library, my heart pounding. I had just had a real conversation with Vincent Romano, and instead of feeling afraid, I felt seen. For the first time in years, someone had looked at me like I was more than just the help. But as I went back to cleaning, a cold fear settled in my stomach. I thought about Tommy, safe in daycare across town, and realized I had just stepped into something much bigger and more dangerous than I could handle. I was falling for a man who lived in constant danger, and I had a son who depended on me to keep him safe. I thought about his words, fear will keep you safe. But as I listened to Tommy's soft breathing beside me, I realized that fear wasn't enough anymore. Do not go to your apartment. Do not go anywhere alone. I'll be there in 15 minutes. The line went to handle turned out to be an attack on one of his warehouses. I learned this not from him, but from the whispered conversations of the other workers over the next few days. 3 men had been sent to the hospital, and a shipment worth $500,000 had been destroyed. Vincent didn't return to the house for 4 days. When he finally came back, it was late at night and I was finishing up in the kitchen. I heard the front door slam, followed by heavy footsteps and what sounded like furniture being moved around roughly. Then silence. I should have finished cleaning and left. I should have minded my own business. But something in the way that door had slammed, something in the quality of the silence that followed, made me worry. I found him in his office, sitting in his chair with his head in his hands. His usually perfect suit was wrinkled, his tie was loose, and there was a cut on his knuckles that looked fresh. Mr. Romano, I said softly from the doorway. His head snapped up and I saw tiredness and something that looked like pain in his eyes. Isabella. You should go home. Are you hurt? I'm fine. But he wasn't fine. I could see it in the tension in his shoulders, in the way he was slightly favoring his left side. You're bleeding, I said, nodding toward his hand. He looked down at his knuckles like he'd forgotten about the injury. It's nothing. Let me clean it. Isabella, please, I said, stepping into the room. You've been kind to me. Let me return the favor. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. There's a first aid kit in the bathroom. I got the kit and came back to find him rolling up his sleeves. Up close, I could see the cut was deeper than I'd thought, and there were bruises forming on his arms. What happened? I asked, gently cleaning the wound. Business disagreement, he said shortly. Does this kind of disagreement happen often in your line of work? More often than I'd like. I put on antiseptic and he hissed slightly. Sorry, I said quietly. You have gentle hands, he said quietly. I looked up and found him watching me with such intensity that it made my breath catch. We were so close I could smell his cologne, could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. Isabella, he said, his voice rough. Yes. You should be afraid of me. I know. But you're not. No, I whispered. I'm not. His hand came up to touch my cheek and I leaned into the touch without thinking. You should run, he said. You should take whatever life you're protecting and run as far from me as possible. My heart stopped. What life I'm protecting? His thumb traced my cheekbone. I know you have secrets, Isabella. I can see it in your eyes. The way you check your phone all the time. The way you rush out of here every evening like someone's waiting for you. The way you work 3 jobs but live in a studio apartment that costs $600 a month. I pulled back, panic flooding through me. I don't know what you mean. I'm not going to hurt you, he said quickly. Or whoever you're protecting. But I need you to understand, being close to me puts people in danger. The Torrino family, they don't just come after me. They come after everything I care about. And do you? I asked, my voice barely heard. Care about me? He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, more than I should. More than is safe. Vincent. I breathed, and hearing his name on my lips seemed to break something in him. He stood up quickly, putting distance between us. You need to quit. What? This job. You need to quit and stay away from me. I can't, I said, standing too. I need this job. I need the money. I'll give you money, enough to get by until you find something else. I don't want your charity. It's not charity. It's survival. His voice was sharp with frustration. Don't you understand? The Torrino family is getting worse. They're not just hitting my businesses anymore. They're looking for weaknesses for pressure points. And you? He ran his hands through his hair. You're becoming a weakness. The words hit me like a slap. I see. No, you don't see, he said, moving toward me again. You think I'm rejecting you, but I'm trying to protect you. There's a difference. Is there? I asked, wrapping my arms around myself. Because from where I'm standing it feels the same. Isabella, I'll finish out the week, I said, moving toward the door. Then I'll find something else. Wait. His voice stopped me at the doorway. I need you to know, if things were different, if I were different. I turned back to look at him, this powerful man who suddenly seemed lost. But they're not different. And neither are you. I left him standing in his office, and as I walked through the empty mansion, I felt tears burning my eyes. I had been stupid to think there could be anything between us. I was a cleaning lady with a secret son, and he was the head of a crime family. We lived in different worlds. And I had been foolish to think love could bridge that gap. But as I drove home through the quiet streets, I couldn't stop thinking about the way he'd touched my face, the way he'd said my name like a prayer. And I couldn't stop thinking about his words, more than I should, more than is safe. I was so lost in thought that I almost missed the black car that had been following me since I left the mansion. My blood turned to ice as I realized what was happening. I thought about Vincent's warnings, about the business card in my purse, about the dangerous world I had somehow stumbled into. And I thought about Tommy, sleeping peacefully in our apartment, completely unaware that his mother had just become a target. I reached for my phone with shaking hands. But before I could dial Vincent's number, the car's headlights flashed twice in my rearview mirror. A signal. They wanted me to know they were there. I didn't go home that night. Instead, I drove to a 24-hour diner across town and sat in a corner booth, watching the parking lot and trying to think. The black car hadn't followed me there. Or if it had, it was staying well hidden. My hands shook as I dialed Mrs. Chen's emergency number. Isabella, it's almost midnight. Is everything okay? Mrs. Chen, I need a huge favor. Can Tommy stay with you tonight? I'll pay extra. There's a family emergency. Of course, honey. He's already asleep in the spare room anyway. But are you all right? You sound scared. I'm fine, I lied. I'll pick him up tomorrow after work. I hung up and stared at Vincent's business card, thinking about my choices. If I called him, I'd be admitting that I was in danger because of him. I'd be pulling him deeper into my life, showing the secret I'd worked so hard to protect. But if I didn't call him and something happened to me, what would happen to Tommy? I was still thinking when my phone rang. Vincent's name flashed on the screen. Isabella, where are you? How did you? My security system shows you left the house 40 minutes ago, but you never made it home. Where are you? I closed my eyes, realizing he'd been having me watched. The diner on Ashland Avenue. Stay there. I'm coming to get you. Vincent, I can't. You called me Vincent, he said quietly. You've never done that before. This isn't the time. Isabella, listen to me very carefully. Do not leave that diner. Dead, and I sat in the bright diner, drinking a cup of coffee and watching every car that passed. 15 minutes felt like hours. When Vincent finally walked through the door, I felt relief so strong it scared me. He was dressed in all black, and there was something different about him. Something harder, more dangerous than the man I'd been bandaging just hours before. He slid into the booth across from me, his eyes scanning the room before settling on my face. Tell me what happened. A black car followed me from your house. They wanted me to know they were there. His jaw clenched. License plate. I was too scared to look. It's okay, he said, reaching across the table to cover my hand with his. You did the right thing by not going home. How did you know I was in trouble? Because I had someone watching you, he admitted. And he reported that you were being followed. You've been having me watched? Since the day the Torrinos threatened me in my house, he said. I told you they look for weaknesses, pressure points. I couldn't risk them finding you. I stared at him, taking in this information. So you knew I was in danger, but you still told me to quit? I told you to quit because you're in danger, he said. Isabella, these people, they don't just threaten. They act. And if they think you matter to me, do I? I asked. Matter to you? He was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of my hand. Yes, he said finally. Too much. Then help me understand, I said. Help me understand your world, because I'm already in it whether I want to be or not. You don't understand what you're asking. I understand that someone followed me tonight. I understand that I'm scared to go home. I understand that you're the only person who can help me. I took a shaky breath. And I understand that I'm falling in love with you even though I know I shouldn't. The words hung between us, raw and honest. Vincent's hand tightened on mine. Isabella, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I know it's crazy. I know we're from different worlds. But I can't help how I feel. If you stay in my world, there's no going back, he said. Once you're in, you're in. And the people I love, they become targets. I'm already a target. Not like this. Not really. Right now you're just someone who works for me. But if you become more than that, what if I want to become more than that? He studied my face in the harsh diner lighting. There are things about me you don't know. Things I've done. I know enough. Do you? He leaned forward. I've killed people, Isabella. Not in self-defense. Not by accident. I've looked men in the eye and pulled the trigger because they threatened what was mine. I felt a chill run through me, but I didn't pull my hand away. Were they good men? What? The men you killed, were they good men who didn't deserve it? Or were they men who hurt innocent people? He blinked, clearly not expecting that question. They were men who sold drugs to children, who trafficked women, who killed families for money. Then you did what you had to do to protect people who couldn't protect themselves. It's not that simple, isn't it? I interrupted. Vincent, I've been poor my whole life. I've seen what happens when there's no one to stand up to the predators, no one to protect the vulnerable. Maybe your methods aren't normal, but your intentions, you're making this sound better than it is, he said. But his voice was uncertain. No, I'm not. I'm seeing you. The real you. The man who works 18-hour days to take care of the families who depend on him. The man who treats his workers with respect. The man who's trying to protect me even though it would be easier to just let me go. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of my words settling between us. There's something else, I said finally. Something I need to tell you. What? I took a deep breath, knowing that what I was about to say would change everything. I have a son. Vincent went very still. What? His name is Tommy. He's 3 years old. His father left when I was pregnant, and it's just been the two of us ever since. Tears started flowing down my cheeks. That's why I work 3 jobs. That's why I can't afford to quit. That's why I'm so scared right now, because if something happens to me, he has no one. Vincent stared at me for a long moment, taking in this news. Where is he now? Safe with his daycare provider. Isabella, he said slowly, why didn't you tell me? Because I was afraid you'd see me differently, as a liability or a complication or as someone with even more reason to be protected, he finished quietly. I looked up at him through my tears. What? You think having a child makes you less valuable to me? Isabella, it makes you more precious than you could possibly imagine. I don't understand. He slid out of his side of the booth and moved to sit beside me, pulling me against his chest. I grew up without a father for most of my life. I know what it's like to watch your mother struggle, to feel helpless and scared. I would never let that happen to your son. Vincent, what's his name again? Tommy. Tommy, he repeated softly. I'd like to meet him someday. When this is all over, when it's safe. I pulled back to look at him. You mean that? I mean it. He cupped my face in his hands. Isabella, I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to think carefully before you answer. Okay. Will you let me protect you? Both of you? It means staying close to me, living in my world, accepting my protection. It means giving up your independence, at least for now. And it means trusting me completely. I thought about Tommy sleeping peacefully at Mrs. Chen's house. I thought about the black car, about the fear I'd felt driving through the dark streets. I thought about Vincent's hands on my face, gentle despite the violence they were capable of. Yes, I whispered. He kissed me then, soft and desperate, like he'd been holding back for months. When we broke apart, his forehead rested against mine. Then we need to go, he said. Right now. It's not safe to stay here any longer. Where are we going? To get Tommy, he said. And then home, to my home where I can keep you both safe. As we left the diner together, Vincent's arm around my waist, I felt like I was stepping across a line into a new life. A dangerous life, but one where I wouldn't have to face the darkness alone. I just hoped I was strong enough for what was coming. 2 years later, I'm standing in the kitchen of Vincent's mansion. Our mansion now, watching Tommy chase Vincent's dog around the backyard. At 5 years old, Tommy has Vincent wrapped around his little finger. And Vincent has embraced fatherhood with the same intensity he brings to everything else in his life. Mama, look. Tommy calls out, waving from the swing set Vincent had put in last spring. Daddy's pushing me really high. Daddy. The word still makes my heart skip a beat. Vincent adopted Tommy 6 months after we moved in together, and watching them together. This powerful, dangerous man being completely undone by a little boy's laughter. Never gets old. The Torrino family is no longer a threat. Vincent handled that situation with his usual efficiency, though he's never told me the details. I've learned not to ask about certain parts of his business, and he's learned to leave that world at the door when he comes home to us. Mrs. Romano, Maria says, appearing beside me with a smile. She still works here, though now as head of household staff rather than just housekeeper. Mr. Romano called. He'll be home for dinner. Mrs. Romano. I'm still getting used to that too. We got married last fall in a small ceremony in the mansion's garden, with Tommy as ring bearer and Vincent's entire extended family there. It was the first time I truly understood how big the organization Vincent leads was. Not just criminals but families, children, grandparents, people who depend on him for their living and protection. Thank you, Maria, I say, still watching my boys in the yard. My phone buzzes with a text from Vincent, bringing home a surprise for Tommy and flowers for my beautiful wife. See you soon. I smile, typing back, we'll be waiting. As I put my phone away, I think about that terrified woman who sat in a diner 2 years ago, afraid to go home, afraid to trust, afraid to love. I think about the choice I made that night, to step into Vincent's world, to accept his protection, to build a life with him despite all the reasons it shouldn't work. It hasn't been easy. There have been moments of fear, times when Vincent's business required him to be away for days. Times when I've had to trust that the man I love would come home safe. But there have also been moments of pure joy. Watching Vincent teach Tommy to ride a bike, seeing him at school plays and soccer games, witnessing him become not just a husband but a father. Mama. Tommy runs up to me, breathless and grinning. Daddy says we're having pizza for dinner. Does he now? I laugh, ruffling his dark hair. And what makes Daddy think he gets to decide what we're having for dinner? Because I'm the boss, Vincent says, appearing in the doorway with a bunch of white roses and a pizza box from Tommy's favorite restaurant. You're the boss of a lot of things, I say, going to kiss him hello. But in this kitchen I'm the boss. Yes, ma'am, he says with a grin, pulling me close. How was your day? Good. I finished the final edits on the children's book. My editor thinks it'll be ready for publication by Christmas. Vincent's face lights up with pride. That's incredible, baby. After we moved in together, Vincent encouraged me to pursue my writing. I've published 3 children's books now, with a 4th on the way. It's not the career I originally planned, but it's one that lets me work from home, be present for Tommy, and use my literature degree in a way that brings me joy. Can we read it tonight? Tommy asks, climbing onto Vincent's lap. Of course, I say. But first, pizza and homework. As we sit around the kitchen table, Vincent helping Tommy with his math while I grade papers from the literacy program I volunteer with, I'm struck by how normal this feels. How everyday and peaceful despite the armed guards at the gate and the bulletproof glass in the windows. Vincent catches me staring and raises an eyebrow. What? Just thinking about how much has changed. Regrets? He asks quietly. None, I say firmly. Not a single one. Later that night, after Tommy is asleep and Vincent has finished his evening calls, we sit together on the balcony overlooking the garden. The city lights twinkle in the distance and I can hear the faint sound of traffic from the streets below. I have something to tell you, I say, taking his hand. Good something or bad something? Good something. Very good something. He turns to face me fully. Isabella. I'm pregnant, I whisper. The words hang in the air between us and for a moment, Vincent is completely still. Then his face breaks into the biggest smile I've ever seen. Are you sure? I took 3 tests this morning. I'm sure. He pulls me into his arms, spinning me around despite the fact that we're sitting down. When? 7 months. Just in time for summer. Tommy's going to be so excited, he says, his voice thick with emotion. Are you excited? Excited doesn't begin to cover it, he says, cupping my face in his hands. Isabella, you've given me everything I never knew I wanted. A family, a home, a reason to be better than I was. You were already good, I say. I just helped you see it. I love you, he says, kissing me softly. More than I thought it was possible to love someone. I love you too, I whisper against his lips. As we sit together under the stars, planning for our growing family and dreaming about the future, I think about that night 2 years ago when a little boy knocked on Vincent's door and said, "They took my mom." Except it wasn't Tommy who knocked. It was a neighbor's child, scared and looking for help. But that moment, that night, led to everything we have now. Sometimes the most dangerous choices lead to the most beautiful destinations. Sometimes stepping into the unknown is the only way to find home. And sometimes love really is enough to bridge any gap, overcome any obstacle, and create something extraordinary from the most unlikely circumstances. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched your heart, hit like and share it with someone who believes love conquers all. Until next time.